It's Naomi Scott's world, and we're just living in it.
911, what's your emergency?
Hi, I'm Lady Genevieve, and on my channel I like to talk about entertainment media. It's a new week with a new opening weekend film review. As is customary, that means this review will first have a spoiler-free section and then a spoilers section, so you can proceed as far as you prefer into spoilers. The sections, as always, will be time-stamped. Today's feature event is Smile 2, the sequel to the 2022 smash hit Smile, which grossed more at the box office that year than Scream 6, so is it really that surprising that we would see a return to this world? Once again, we have Parker Finn writing and directing, but for the most part, this is a new cast. Spoiler alert for the first Smile film. That story ended with the film's protagonist Rose being possessed by the Smile monster, which forced her to do away with herself in front of her ex-boyfriend Joel as a means of passing the curse on to him. So the only cast overlap we have in this new film is Joel. He's not the main character, of course, but he appears briefly. I'm not going to spoil too many specifics in this section, but if you've seen the Smile 2 trailer, you will know a fair bit about the film's premise, protagonist, and some of the scares and visual gags that come up throughout. For example, the trailer shows you how the film's protagonist, Skye Riley, becomes infected with the Smile entity. The film shows you the full scene uncensored, but you do get a lot of the beats of that scene in the trailer. It felt as though this new film was leaning a lot more into body horror and gore than the first film did, but some context for my perspective in watching this Smile sequel is I recently saw Terrifier 3, so comparatively speaking, I could watch Smile 2 and be more or less fine with the level of body horror and gore because it simply doesn't compare to that dark-sided indie smash. After all, Smile 2 has to answer to the MPA and the major studio, but it's apples and oranges. Actually, a quick sidebar about Terrifier 3 since I never did a review of that because I wasn't able to see it opening weekend to where I would have been able to do a review of it in a timely manner. When I went and saw Terrifier 3, there was a woman in my row who covered her eyes every single time there was gore. And I couldn't help but wonder while this was happening, did you buy a ticket to the wrong film? What are you sitting in here for if you're going to cover your eyes for at least, a solid third of the film's runtime? Just a question. Naomi Scott plays pop star Skye Riley, and her performance is carrying this film. Now, make no mistake, the visual style and camera work has been elevated significantly from the first film, but it's all of these close-ups on Naomi where you get to watch her deliver an incredible performance that is going to have horror fans hollering for years or decades about how the awards show sector has an anti-horror bias, and she should have been nominated for accolades. Where are Naomi Scott's trophies? We had Toni Collette in Ari Aster's Hereditary, Lupita Nyong'o in Jordan Peele's Us, and now we have Naomi Scott in Parker Finn's Smile 2. Aesthetically, this film is excellent, whether it's that visual style in the cinematography and camera work, all of these eerie pans that are used to either track characters, explore a space, or transition from one location to another. It's impeccable work. Also, all of the costumes, makeup, and production design to make Skye Riley a believable pop star, both when she's done up to do her pop star work of performing, rehearsals, promotion, or even just her lounging around at home and sneaking around to try to score some substances or information. I had no notes to give on any of that. Given the fact that this is a sequel, the element of surprise was lacking at times. If you've seen the first film, you know what the general premise is, so you probably have some idea of where the story is going to end up. Not only that, like I said, the trailer showed a lot of scares or big moments and escalations in the story that ranged from, I would say, somewhere between the first 50 to 60% of the film. The overall structure of that first chunk of the film is something I felt like I had already seen from having watched the trailer repeatedly during my regular visits to the cinema. However, there were still portions of the story that didn't get spoiled by the trailer, and the fact that the details of the end remained largely unspoiled was a massive selling point, because that was the final impression that I was going to reflect on first and foremost once I would leave the cinema. The monster or entity, whatever you would like to call it, feels considerably more mean-spirited in this film, and I don't know if that's solely coming from the writing choices, Naomi's acting, or some of the themes that are explored in this film, or perhaps an amalgamation of all of those things. But not only that, this story seemed to lean in even more heavily into the idea of the protagonist being an unreliable narrator. I could see that as potentially being, I don't know if controversial would be the word, but something that would spark a great deal of discussion. Even now, having seen the film and and thought about the material a fair bit in order to be able to share my review. I couldn't tell you all of which parts of the film really did happen versus which parts were happening purely in her mind, because the entity was making her think that that's what was happening. I found that I enjoyed the Smile 2 ending more than the first Smile ending, although they are both good in their own ways. I found this ending to be more compelling both visually and narratively, and overall I found that Smile 2 struck a really good balance where on the one hand the story and Naomi's performance puts you in this place of despair and hopelessness, but because the visual style and aesthetics were so much more grandiose, and because I personally tend to be more excited by really dynamic acting, that it made the viewing experience more fun overall. I love powerful acting as well as maximalism, so it made for a strong counterweight to what otherwise might have been a very emotionally negative viewing experience. And the final point to share in this spoiler-free section is my Letterboxd rating. During my viewing, initially I was leaning towards a 3.5 because I felt as if I had seen a lot of things already in the trailer, but once we moved out of that part of the film and it was bringing me back towards focusing on Naomi's incredible performance and these big visuals and certain thematic elements that I will talk a little bit more about in the spoiler section, I had to bump it up to a 4. If you're new or you mostly only watch my film reviews here on YouTube, you might think, well, she gives almost everything a 4. I promise that's not the case. If you follow my Letterboxd, you will see me logging other new theatrical releases lower or higher than that, but it's all graded on a curve within a calendar year to help me organize the private list that I keep in the lead up to the top 10 films video that all of us here on YouTube tend to make at the end of the year.
You okay?
I keep seeing this face everywhere.
But now let's talk about spoilers. I suppose I will go through a fair bit of this sequentially. I loved the opening death of Kyle Gallner's character Joel, that long take that they used with the handheld cam following him as we reveal where he is and how he gets into that house. It could have been one take or it could have been a couple of extended takes carefully edited together to make it seem like it was just one take, but either way, the finished result was excellent. It was so high energy, high impact, full of drama and tension, and something that would have been perfectly matched to the action genre. I can't say enough good things about that opening, and I was also pleasantly surprised when Lukas Gage's character, Lewis, was revealed to be in that room. I wasn't necessarily presuming that Joel would be the one to pass it on to him directly. It could have just as easily been something that happened further back the chain of people, or perhaps a separate chain altogether. I also found it incredibly interesting to see how, even though Joel passed it on, he still got albeit by being hit by a car. And there was something about that finale for the opening that felt reminiscent of Final Destination. It was just giving these notes of death having a grand design or a grand plan or something to that effect. And then we of course jumped to Naomi Scott's character Skye Riley doing her comeback appearance on the Drew Barrymore show. And I loved that transition they used where the camera zoomed in to shift the perspective from being the camera that was filming her on the show to broadcast her to the viewers to the camera of the film itself, giving us that extreme close-up on her in order to really pull us in to learn more about her. It felt like this film did a significantly higher amount of close-ups than usual on Naomi, and it was absolutely the right choice because the work she was doing to emote all of that pain and turmoil that she has from both before and after she gets infected with the Smile entity, it was just stunning to watch. Overall, I really liked the choice to shift the narrative and thematic core of this story to be about the concept of fame and how some people pursue fame with this idea that it will fix their problems, but if you've got bigger issues going on internally that you don't address, fame will absolutely not be the solution to those issues. Naomi Scott was incredibly convincing as a pop star, from the songs, the dancing, the way she wore these outfits. Miss Skye Riley was serving face, body, vocals, showmanship. I loved all of it. Even the opening lyric video that was played to count down to the film playing, I was just living. I so appreciate that they went above and beyond to film all of the supplementary material for Skye Riley to be believable as a pop star. It might seem like a small detail, but I appreciated that so much. Naomi Scott, if your heart ever shifted to where you wanted to be first and foremost a pop star, I fully believe in your capabilities to accomplish that. However, the last time I checked, there are no labor unions for music artists under these major record labels, so perhaps let's just focus on you gifting the world with your incredible acting, and you can be a member of SAG and Equity and any other acting labor union in other industries if you were to decide to expand to other regions besides those two. too. A pleasant surprise to see Raúl Castillo in this film as Darius, the man who is bankrolling the tour. I've interviewed Raúl before. We had a long interview here together on my channel. If you're ever wanting to learn more about him, it is an older interview, but it is there. Smile 2 undoubtedly has the scariest scare for me in both films, which is the one involving the creepy superfan whom the Smile entity makes her believe has broken into her apartment. Now, if you have a different scare as the one that scared you the most, you can let me know which one you've chosen in the comments, but that one was my scariest and it wasn't even close. Some of the scares from the Smile entity were ones that I felt like I could anticipate somewhat, but others were ones I did not see coming at all. For example, when Skye was in her bathroom all in a panic, trying to pack up her things to run away, and then her pills go flying everywhere, and then she smashes the shower door and there's all this glass on the floor. When Skye began to pick up some pills to take, I thought at least one of those was going to actually be a piece of glass. Why wouldn't the Smile monster try to mess up her vocal cords when she's a pop star being bullied by her show mother into touring when she's clearly not well enough to be doing so? I think the biggest twist of the film for me was when Skye's mother was still alive at the end of the film. I really thought that that death was real. And it was really interesting to see how hard the film went with the unreliable narrator concept. I suppose the biggest question I have for other viewers of the film is, do you think Morris, the nurse who was texting her, do you think he ever existed at all? Or do you think only that first encounter at the bar was real? Of course, I don't think the final interactions with him happened whatsoever, but I am curious to know if anyone believes the first sit down with him actually happened. I go back and forth with thinking it was real or it was just the monster messing with her head from the very beginning, but I have yet to firmly commit to one or the other. I love the ending of Smile 2 far more than Smile 1 because I loved the design of that Hellraiser-esque monster. It looked like it was mostly practical, especially when it grabbed hold of Skye to go in there. And I love the idea of more horror films doing practical effects with building actual monsters and creatures. Now, I'm not anti-VFX. I'm a massive fan of James Cameron's Avatar films, but I would like for those art forms to be kept alive and thriving. The people who train to become skilled in these mediums, they need a salary increase for starters, and the fans need to be loud and emphatic in praising these art forms and demanding that the people who write checks provide enough of a budget for people to keep using those effects, whether it's in horror or fantasy or any other genre. By the way, my Your Monster review has already been filmed, and that should be my next video here on this channel. I also love the Smile 2 ending because of the potential ramifications of it. Now, typically we've seen the conclusions of these week-long possessions or infections, whatever you would like to call them, be a situation of one-to-one. One person is infected, they get gobbled up over the course of a week, and then they take themselves out in front of one person whom the Smile entity will spread to next. But Skye Riley did what she did on stage at a big arena show with an entire crowd full of witnesses. So is this a mass spreading event? Can the monster duplicate or pass on in such a way that it's infecting all of those people? I don't know, some food for thought. I'm not sure what Parker Finn's plan is for this story, but if this is a situation where the studio will retain the rights to the IP, if and when Parker Finn decides to move on to other projects and different storytellers are brought in to continue in that world, I think my investment in new stories will remain dependent on there being an extremely skilled actor portraying the protagonist, visually dynamic filmmaking, and probably some sort of compelling theme being woven into the story. The first film had unresolved childhood trauma, the second film was focusing on the hollowness of fame, and what comes next after that, who can say? I would presume that a third Smile film will be dependent on the profitability of this one, so we will probably have to wait and see how this one performs before we know whether to expect more gleefully mean-spirited Smile entity antics.